So to kind of understand where we're going to be today, I want to quickly review the conversation from last week, only because where we left off last week, we are still right smack dab in the middle of that conversation. We haven't left it yet. So last week, you'll remember, if you look back at verses 31 through 47, Jesus makes two claims about the believers who were there. The ones who had believed in him. Do you remember what those claims were? And I'll help you if you don't remember. He tells them that they were not free at all because they're children of Abraham, but were in fact slaves to what? Sin. You're not free because you're a child of Abraham. You're actually a slave. And the second one, as they keep going, like, no, Abraham's our father. God is our father. And he says, you're a child of who? Satan. You're a child of Satan and you're a slave to sin. And it was a harsh conversation. But what else did he do? In the midst of that harsh interaction, Jesus is offering them freedom from sin and freedom from Satan's tyranny over them. And what was the one condition that he gave them to receiving this freedom? We talked about it this past Wednesday at our backyard bonfire. Abide. Abide in his word. And abiding in his word meant that they would be true disciples of Jesus and that they would know the truth. And what would this truth do to them? It would set them free from being a slave to sin and being under Satan's tyranny over them. But we know Jesus said to them, my word has no home in you, though. It lands on you and you don't receive it. You don't have ears to hear it. There's no home in you for my words that have life-giving power. So today we're going to kind of step right back into the middle of that conversation. We haven't left it. And we're going to see now the Jews' response to Jesus as he has just told them, no, you're not a child of Abraham. You're a child of Satan. And you're not of God, and you don't receive the truth. So look at verse 48. This is what we're stepping into immediately, is their harsh response to him. They say in verse 48 to Jesus, the Jews answered him, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? So the Jews who were believers, remember this conversation is with those who claim belief in Jesus, are now incensed at Jesus. They're angry at him. Who knew that telling a bunch of religious people they're a child of Satan would make such a big deal? But I guess that it does. I've already told you, I think I said this last week, talking about this stuff is not winning you any friends at any party, so be careful with it. But this is what we're seeing here. They're mad at what he has just said. They're offended by him because they believe they are free. They even retorted back to him earlier, what do you mean we're not free? How can we be free? We already are. And they truly believe that they did love God. So they're offended by Jesus and what he's just said. So what do? In verse 48, they hurl an insult at him. They say that what he has just said about them, how can you say that we Jews are not children of Abraham? You saying that has confirmed our thought. You are possessed by a demon. That's pretty self-explanatory, right? He's not of God. They're pretty much saying what he just said about them, they're putting it back on him. You're not of God. You're deceived, and you're a liar because you're saying these things about us that aren't true. That's pretty self-explanatory. But look at the Samaritan part. Them saying this was just adding salt in the wound of Jesus. The Samaritan people we know back from John 4, were they heavily liked by the Jewish people? No. They were despised by the Jews. So the Samaritans were like second-class citizens in their eyes. They were not looked upon in favor. They were considered to be half-breed pagans, if you will, who were not even worthy of talking to. And there were Samaritan prophets at this time. When you read through Acts, you'll see it, I think in chapter 8, who would make these great claims, and the Jews regarded all the Samaritan prophets as demon-possessed and false prophets. So what are they saying about Jesus now? That's you. You're a demon-possessed false prophet, and you're a Samaritan. So just a few moments earlier, I want you to remember, I know it's hard because we break up the passages so much and weeks go by. Moments earlier in this conversation, they believed in him. And now they're telling him, you're demon-possessed, you're a false prophet, and you're a Samaritan nonetheless. Things have quickly turned sour. So look at Jesus' response to them. This is what they've just said about him. Now look at Jesus' response, verses 49 through 51. Jesus answered them, I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. So Jesus is truth, right? He is the truth. So because he's truth, he rebukes a false claim. He says, no, that's not true. I'm not demon-possessed. In fact, I only seek to honor my Father, but you dishonor me. So we've been through this time and time again. If they're dishonoring Jesus, who are they really dishonoring? God. They're dishonoring the Father because the Father and Son are one, and because the Father has sent Jesus in the world to accomplish his work. So dishonoring one means that you dishonor the other. Jesus even says in verse 50 that he doesn't seek his own glory, right? If he did, he would not be someone that we should follow if he was seeking to exalt himself in a proud and worldly kind of way. But he says that the Father himself seeks it for him. And he says, and my Father is the judge. So what he's saying there? God's approval of me is the only one that matters. You can reject me all you want. You can say I'm demon-possessed all you want. But it's not true. And his approval is the only one that matters. And that goes for us today too. The world's idea of us doesn't matter. It's only the approval of the Father that we should be seeking. So Jesus briefly responds to their accusations, right? In verse 49 through 50, he calls them out. He says that's not true. But despite their accusations against him, he doesn't spend that much time defending himself. Right? They just said he's demon-possessed, a false prophet, and a Samaritan. And he kind of just brushes it over. He doesn't defend himself very long. Look at verse 51 again. Jesus kind of defends himself for a second. He speaks what's true because they were saying false things. But then he kind of turns the corner in the conversation almost abruptly, almost seemingly out of nowhere. And he says, if anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. If anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. So look back in your text at verse 21 for a moment. John chapter 8, verse 21. I don't have it on the screen. What does he say in verse 21? Same conversation. Verse 21. Jesus says, so he said to them again, I am going away, and you will seek me, and you will what? Die in your sin. Where I am going, you cannot come. So same conversation. Jesus has already told them that they would die in their sins, right? So what is he doing now? What is he doing now? He's offering them a way to get out of death's grip, saying, you will die in your sin. Now he's saying that my words are life when you keep them. You will not see death. So this is what I want you to see time and time again in these conversations. That despite how harsh or difficult these conversations have been, maybe you're like, man, Jesus is kind of a mean guy. I don't get what he's doing here. I want you to see this time and time again. What is he doing? He's offering them life. He's extending to them life, a new spiritual life. This is eternal life from God, for now, and for all of eternity. He's offering them escape from death. This is what he's doing. This is why he's talking about these things, and it would be a far greater freedom than the Exodus from Egypt. This freedom that he's speaking about here from death would be from the power of sin and death so that they could have real, true life in him. This is what he keeps offering to them. So yeah, this conversation is a little hard. Yeah, he's really speaking some really tough truths to bear, but he's offering them life. He's offering them salvation. If anyone keeps my word, he will never see death. So this is the first audacious claim that Jesus makes. His words give life. Jesus' words give life. So why, if we keep or abide in his word, will we never see death? Why will we never see death if we keep His word. We talked about it from last week, John 6:63. What are Jesus' words? Spirit and what? Life. Jesus' words are spirit and life. And when we receive His words then with soft hearts, it produces in us new spiritual life. Now the key to this is having a soft heart to receive it. Did they have it? No. My words find no home in you. Therefore, you have no life. Many of you know that I have a small garden at home. This is my garden from last year. I always get a little insecure when I do garden illustrations because I'm like, there's too many gardeners in here and farmers are going to laugh at me. If you see something in that picture that's off, just leave me alone about it. I know there's weeds. I know the plants are too close together probably. It's way too small. My tomato plant's out of control. But this was my garden from last year. So kind of small. You can see that on the sides. There's still some grass. This year, though, I wanted to expand it a little bit bigger. I added some things like carrots, which I don't even know if I have them. I'm mistaking weeds for carrots. It's not good. But I added carrots, lettuce, pumpkins, and I added way more tomato plants. So this is my garden bed this year. A little nicer, right? So that's it. But it's a lot bigger. I expanded a lot more. I added a lot more things to it. And it's a lot more weeding and things like that, a lot more upkeep. But it's bigger. So to expand my garden, what did I have to do? Right? And I know we don't have a lot of gardeners in here, so just listen up. I'll give you some advice. I had to take my rototiller. I had to sink it into the ground and run it until it chopped up all the dirt and all the grass. Why? Why did I have to do that? Because there's a lot of grass. If you look at that first picture, look at all the grass on the sides, right? And that's hard soil. Right? So I can't just come by and drop pumpkin seeds on top of the grass and be like, oh, see you in a couple months, you'll pop up and grow. Right? That would be really nice if you could do that. Save me a lot of work. But it doesn't work that way. So I had to till the ground so that when I started dumping the seeds out, it would land on good soil. That's what you have to do with gardening. That's a free tip. You guys can use it. But what happens then when you dump seed on good soil? What happens when you dump it in good soil and it has water and light? It grows. It produces life. So from the seeds, just those little seeds, it comes a living plant that produces good fruit that then I in turn eat it and it gives me life. Do you see that? It falls on good soil. It bears life. I eat it and it gives me life. So those seeds that were once dry and sitting in the aisle of Walmart are now producing life-bearing plants in my garden. Why? Because they fell on good, soft soil that was ready to receive them. This is what the word of Jesus is like when it falls on a heart that's ready to receive it. It has life-giving power to it. And His words, I want you to hear this today, can change your life exceedingly more than you could ever imagine. Jesus' words can make slaves free. Right? It can heal a broken marriage. It can give the downcast hope. It can give the anxious person peace. I was listening to a sermon this past week, and the guy was talking about, I don't remember some stuff, shows how much I was listening. But he was talking about how he used to have social anxiety and things like that. And again, I know this is much deeper than that. There's real issues concerning that. But his brother called him up one day. He became a Christian. His brother called him up one day and he said, hey, I'm still dealing with this social anxiety thing. And I know you've kind of overcome it. Can you tell me what you've done? And he's like, it's Jesus. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but Jesus has given me peace, or I'm not enslaved to that anymore. It doesn't overcome me anymore. I feel free from it. And then he went on to say how his brother came to know Jesus. But this is what the word of Jesus does. It comes in us and it produces in us life. Because the word of Jesus has power. The word of Jesus has power in your life to take that which is dead, right? Which is who? Us, spiritually without Jesus. It has the power to take dead things and bring them to life. It has the power to take our dead spirits and breathe us life and give us new life. What is this life? It's a loving, eternal relationship with the God who made you and who is ready and eager to adopt you into his family and make you his son and daughter. That's life. Life with God is only found in him. That's true life to the fullest. This is the life-giving power of Jesus' word. And this is what he's inviting them into. And this is what he's inviting us to. A life lived with God where sin and death no longer rule over us. This is what he's calling them to. If you keep my word, you will never see death. But just like the seed landing on good soil, we must receive his word, right? We must believe in his word in our hearts. We must abide in it, keep it, cherish it, obey it, because his words are life. And when we receive his word, what does he promise? Verse 51, that you will never see death. Have you ever considered in your life how much you are fighting back against death every day? Have you ever thought about that? Every time you breathe, you're fighting against death. Every time you take a pill in the morning to ease your aching pains, every time you go to the gym to try to stay in shape, every time you go out in the evening for a walk, every time you strap up your seatbelt in the car, every surgery you've had, every piece of healthy food that you eat is an attempt for us to push back death. Isn't that the ultimate fear? That's the worst thing that could happen to someone, right? We are every day inching closer and closer to this reality, and yet we do things that push that back, right? That's fair? Okay? But death, I want you to see, is not a part of God's original design. Death was just not a part of it. It came because of sin entering into the world. So if you have your Bible, you don't have to turn there to Genesis, but what did God tell Adam in the garden that would happen if he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? What did he say? You'll die. You will surely die. This is the exact quote. It says, and catch the first part, in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. In the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Okay, good Bible students, you guys have been in church for a long time mostly. Did Adam and Eve physically die that day when they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Did they die? No, they didn't die. So did God lie? Is he a liar? Of course not. What he's talking about here is something more than just a physical death. God is talking about something more than just physical. And this is what Jesus means here too, even though they don't understand what he's talking about. Look at verses 52 and 53. I don't have them on the screen, and I'll just paraphrase it briefly. They say, now we know that you have a demon. Abraham and the prophets, they even died. Yet you say anyone who keeps my word will never taste death? Who do you make yourself out to be? Who do you think you are? So this is what they're saying to him. You think you're better than the heroes of our faith? You think you're better than Abraham or better than the prophets? Even they died. You think you're better than them? They think he's just talking about physical death. If you believe my words, you're never going to die. It's not what he's talking about. He's talking about something more, something deeper than just passing away from our physical shells. So just like in the garden, there is a death that is far greater than just our physical bodies dying. So let's just think about this. What happens in the garden immediately after Adam and Eve eat the fruit? What do when they hear God walking in the garden? They hide from him. So when God's presence at one time was a delight, a joy. They loved his presence. They loved walking with God. And everything was peaceful and harmony. And there was great communion and relationship. They hear him and they say, oh no, go hide. You see the shame about them. They hide from God. And then God confronts Adam. And then what do? She did it. He did it. The serpent did it. They blame shift. And what does God ultimately have to do? He casts them out of the garden. He casts them out of the garden. What does that mean? Separation. They were being cast out of the presence of God. when they left the garden. Because the Garden of Eden was a temple. It was a place where God and man could dwell together safely and in peace and in love. This is the temple and tabernacle language you get through the Old Testament. There's a set-aside space where someone can meet with God and you're going to be okay. It's not going to kill you. Now, this is Eden before sin. Everything was perfect, and they could walk and live with each other and live in peace. But because of sin, they separate. Because of sin, they separate. So I want you to see this. God didn't lie to them when he said, you're going to die. They did die that day. But it wasn't a physical death. It was spiritual. So I just want to give you a very brief definition on spiritual death. Are you going to I don't know if you can handle this. Death is separation from God. Death is separation from God. It's a death inside of us when we are separated from the life source, where we were made to experience and know the life and the love of God in our inner being and cherish it and walk in it and know it and have intimate space with it. We now experience emptiness. Right? We experience void and we experience discontent in our lives. Why? Because we were meant to have life with the life giver. We were meant to have life with him. We were not meant to be separated from him. And so when we don't have him in our lives and we aren't connected with him in our souls, we experience the grave realities of being separated from him, which is an inward spiritual death. This is death, being separated from the one who made us and gives us life. Now, let's take the Old Testament now in perspective. What is Jesus saying now? He's saying that my words have the power to reverse that. We don't have to go through this life being separated from God, longing for things to fill the void in our life, searching for things to satisfy our soul, and always coming up empty. We don't have to do that now. Through Jesus, we can have life with God, and we can have life with each other in peace, the way it was meant to be. This is what Jesus came to claim for us. The Bible used the word reconciliation. Reconciliation, that's what Jesus came to claim. A broken relationship restored back to right standing, restored back to right. And God is still working in the world today to do this. He is still redeeming that which was formerly broken and separated from him to restore it back to himself through Jesus. This is what he's doing. And one day heaven and earth will meet again and it will be perfect harmony like the garden. This is what God is doing in the world through Jesus, in the power of the gospel. So this reconciliation that Jesus speaks of here is macro in nature, right? We read in Romans, creation's groaning and longing and waiting for that day where he's going to restore the earth and all the things. But it's also micro in nature. That includes individuals. It includes us on an individual basis. And so kind of as we leave this point, I just want to continue to reiterate this to you. And maybe I say it because I need to hear it. I want you to hear today that God, the maker of heaven and earth, wants relationship with you. God wants you. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Do you ever think of your relationship with God that way? Think about your kids when they come down the stairs. Do you want them to be cold to you? Good morning, Dad. You know? No, you want your kid. You want that joyous fellowship and relationship with them. And that's what God has called us to. God is not up in heaven playing the numbers game, right? Got that one, got that one, got that one. Good luck, see you in heaven later. God doesn't do that. He leaves the 99 to get the one. And we were the one. God leaves the 99 for the one, and he wants relationship with those who pass from death to life, which I'm realizing more and more as we go through John, is life. Relationship with God is new life. That's what he's calling us to here. New spiritual life with God. This is what produces in our souls when we keep the word of Christ, when we believe it and live from it. We're freed from the power of Satan so that we can now love God and love each other. That's the freedom that we have now. That's what he's calling us to here in this passage. Death is separation from God. You can be freed from that. And when you look ahead to John chapter 11, when Jesus goes to the tomb of Lazarus, let me turn there because I'll probably botch the reference. But what does Jesus say to him? Or to her? He says, Jesus said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, you will die physically, though he die. This is the death he's not talking about. Yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. And then Jesus says, do you believe this? Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. Jesus came that we would have life with God. This is what he's calling them to, despite how hard the conversation is. And I just want you to hear today that any prayer you have when you don't know how to pray, when you don't know what to say, you are a child of God, and he's calling you to himself. Bring your baggage, bring your brokenness, bring your, I don't know what to say today, God. Bring it to him because he wants you. Okay? He wants you. This is what he's called us to. Let's finish this out by looking at verses 54 through 58. 54 through 58. So this is what they say to him. Are you greater than our prophets? Are you greater than Abraham? Who do you make yourself out to be? Jesus answered them. He says, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It's my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. So the Jews said to him, you are not 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. I am. So the Jews in verse 53 ask Jesus who he thinks he is. And then in these 54 through 56, Jesus kind of gives them his credentials a little bit. He says in 54 that God who they claim to know and love and serve, that God you're talking about, he glorifies me. He glorifies me. And then he says in verse 55 that unlike them, he knows God and he keeps God's word, unlike they were doing. He keeps God's word. And he says in verse 56, Abraham, who's the father of faith, saw Jesus' day and was glad. Now, there's a ton of controversy surrounding this verse right here about Abraham seeing the day of Jesus and being glad. There's so many different thoughts and views on it, what that meant, what is it prophetic, did he actually see it? So let me just boil it down to this for you. I think there can be agreement across the board in this. Abraham, in faith, in Genesis, believed the promise of God, right? That he was going to bless the nations through his descendant. He believed that he was going to do it. And now, through Jesus, Abraham's faith is affirmed, right? And the plan to bring salvation to the world is at hand through Jesus, the descendant, the seed of Abraham. So he is glad about this. Now, there's plenty of other ways you could take it. This statement has confused many a theologian, so it's not surprising then that they too are confused by him saying this. I think they may be thinking about maybe he's time traveling or something. They say, you're not 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? So they think that what he's saying is, this guy is off the rails, crazy. He's lost his mind, so they call him on it. But this leads to Jesus' next audacious claim in verse 58. Jesus runs, truly, truly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. This is the second audacious claim made by Jesus. Jesus is I am. Jesus is I am. So Jesus' audience, they ridicule him, the idea that he has seen Abraham. But in response, Jesus is so good at this, he gives them something far more harder to accept. He says that he is I am. So he claimed that before Abraham was in his mother's womb, he was. This is Jesus' kind of like biggest mic drop moment ever in the Gospel of John to this point so far. They asked him earlier in verse 53, do you think you're greater than our father Abraham? What's his answer to that question? Yeah, I am actually. I am greater than Abraham because I am. So when Jesus says that he is I am, he's identifying himself with who? God. This is like right on the nose. This is right on the nose for them. He's not just the sent one of God or the Son of God. He's one with God because he is God. If you remember, since John chapter 6, we looked at the Bread of Life discourse, I've stated time and time again that the Gospel of John has its roots in the book of Exodus. Well, here's another example of that. In Exodus 3:13, when God is appointing Moses to go free the slaves from Egypt and from slavery, Moses asks God in verse 13, what should I tell the Israelites when they ask the name of the God who sent me? And keep into context here in proper perspective, the Israelites who were enslaved in Egypt for that long probably were well aware of and worshiping false gods. So who am I going to tell them sent me? And this is what God says to Moses in verse 14. Say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. I am has sent me to you. So what is Jesus doing here in assigning this name to himself? Well, he's clearly speaking of redemption. He's clearly speaking of redemption. So just as the I am through Moses was leading the Israelites out of captivity and out of Egypt's bondage, so now I am through Jesus would lead the world out of sin and death's bondage. He's talking about redemption. This is why Jesus is claiming that he is I am. He's claiming to be the Redeemer who is on mission to save the world. And how would he do it? Let's wrap this up in verse 59. Verse 59. So they picked up stones to throw at him, but Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. Now this is not how he would do it. He escaped their persecution, but here's what I want you to see. One day Jesus will lay down his life and be given over to them. Right? One day they will kill him. They will nail him to a cross and they will put him to death for his blasphemous claims. That will happen one day. We'll get there in John's gospel. So the I am in the book of Exodus disarms the powers of Egypt through divine power and might, right? He shows them how puny their gods are, the Egyptian gods are. He disarms their power through might and power. But through Jesus, the I am is going to disarm the powers of darkness through death. Jesus is going to go to the cross. He's going to let the powers of darkness and of the serpent do its worst on him. And what's going to happen to him? He's going to die. He's going to taste death. He's going to taste separation from God. He's going to take on the sins of the world. Why? If you believe in me, if you keep my word, you will never see death. Jesus took our death on himself. He experienced separation from God so that we could come close to God. That's what I want you to see. This is what he's getting them to. I am going to free you from something much greater than a nation. I'm going to free you from something that enslaves everybody.